Did you know that BDSM and kink are healthy outlets for aggression, imagination, and attention? Hi, and welcome to the Partition, home of kinky wellness. My name is Dana Slosser, and I'm a sexual wellness coach that dives deep into all things kinky. I'm here to show how BDSM and kink deserves a rightful spot within the sexual wellness conversation. So, let's talk about it. Welcome back to the Partition podcast. Dana here with our reoccurring guest, Kat.
Welcome. Hello, everybody.
This episode is super special as we're going to be focusing on sexual wellness and what it means to us. So let's start with you, Katrina. I know sexual wellness is a broad topic, but what are your thoughts about your sexual wellness and how has it impacted your life?
So for me, my sexual wellness is like a journey that I've kind of been going through since I would say COVID. So during that time, I actually started taking it a lot more seriously, including getting a Vaginismus diagnosis through the NHS and then going into sexual therapy and kind of learning about the role of sexual wellness within how it impacts everything from just sex to your mental health to your life, and just kind of really nailing that home. And then from there, it's really impacted me on my career decisions as well. So obviously working with sex toys and within sexual health and sexual wellness as an actual industry.
How long have you been living with that?
So Vaginismus, yes. It sounds like a little tongue twister, doesn't it?
I know. I feel like I can't say it right. Vaginismus.
So I've had it, I would say, since I was 16. But it was things that it wasn't a topic that was talked about until I would say in the UK, about 4 years ago. And then it wasn't until I was 25 and I got my first gynecology appointment. And I was unable to actually get a physical smear test because the intensity of the pain that I felt, I cannot describe the pain to you, but the poor nurse, she has good reflexes because I nearly kicked her by accident. And then from there, it was sitting down and having to be well, what the hell's wrong with me, and looking into it. And that's kind of going on that journey of, okay, this is what I think I have. I've never been able to have a tampon inside of me. Sex has always hurt. It's always been, anything penetrative it's either not happening at all, or it feels like such an intrusion at times that it's kind of been something I've just automatically, as a queer woman, as a woman where people obviously when you have sex with other women, everybody just assumes it's oral. And actually I'm in a situation where people didn't want to do oral. It's always been about penetration. So it's always been a bit painful for me. And then to kind of get this thing where it's the reason it's not happening is because of this has been such an eye-opener. But I would say realistically, I developed it at about 16, up from the ages of 13 up. I had a lot of probably when I came out first, and when I had a lot of older friends, I had people that were always overly touchy with me, which we've also talked about before. And just things like having my boundaries overtaken. And then when it came to losing my virginity, it was one of the most coercive and intrusive situations I've ever been in. And I just always remember the feeling of I can still feel it to this day, that feeling of when I had penetrative sex. It was it wasn't there was no enjoyment. I didn't feel like any of it, losing my virginity, was anything about me. It felt like I was there as a prop for somebody else to get their enjoyment. And I just always remember it feeling when they actually put their fingers inside of me, it felt like they clawed, it almost felt clawed, or almost something was taken from me on that day, scooped out. And then obviously and I just remember it being really painful afterwards, and just feeling like there was something hadn't gone right. And then over the years, when I tried sex again with other people, it had been one of those where it was a very nerve-wracking experience. It was very tense. I was always very nervous. When I said to people I didn't enjoy penetrative sex, it was either people didn't believe me, or it was like the way they would move would be as if to kind of test it out instead of just going and doing what I've told them I like, which is, I prefer clitoral play or I prefer oral. It was like the moment people would try and do anything like try and touch where like my opening, almost it was almost like my body would just tense up and I would just be scared to say anything, but at the same time I would make a pain note. I have an actual hilarious memory of when this happened a few years after losing my virginity. When I came back from uni, I was dog sitting for my parents, and I have so I had two staffies, and at the time it was my big staffy who unfortunately isn't with us, so sad, but he was trained to protect me. And I remember having sex and it hurt so much that I said, ow, this hurts. And apparently I must have said it in such a way because my dog physically forced himself into the room and like put him. So if you did like, I was like, oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So it was, it's embarrassing, but it's a funny story for me.
No, I think that's great. I love that your dog consents that. Like, that's so cute.
Yeah, he was such a good dog. He was a good boy. But yeah, for me, like all of that, it was this massive thing of just like, because of it, I've taken years where it's been like I've not had sex for years, or when I have had sex, it's just been so uninspiring, or like it's just not been pleasurable. And I didn't really understand why. I think at some points there was a part where I just thought maybe I'd been lying about being gay, which I know isn't true. I was embarrassed, and like it was all of this stuff playing on me. And then it wasn't until actually this really normal thing that women are supposed to do, you go to the gynecologist and you get your smear or your pap test. Like that's such a normal part of having a vulva. That next minute, that wasn't something I could do, kind of really threw me and made me have to reevaluate everything I'd kind of understood about my body. And then obviously going and getting the therapy, it's been eye-opening and kind of relearning how vaginismus is like, it's part mental, it's part physical, and like the best way I've ever had it said was like, you had your boundaries within sex not listened to or like pushed past. Vaginismus is almost like a physical boundary that your body just creates as a defense mechanism to protect you at the last moment.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like once I looked at it like that, it was an amazing way of understanding it.
Well, it's kind of beautiful how your body wants to protect you. Like that's what it thinks it's doing.
But it like at some of the most inopportune moments, and you're just like, for Christ's sake.
No, listen to me now. Like it's okay. So like going through that, was there things that when you were learning that were misconceptions that you had it, or thinking about it? Because I read some stats where it was 1% to 6%, but then I saw that it was less, but then I was seeing articles that it's actually quite a bit of women that experience this.
So I think the stats at the moment, they do keep changing. There are a lot of groups that I follow for kind of help on getting like, using dilators, and there is an ever growing community of it. I think the percentage is probably closer to the first set of stats which you sent me, which is like the 5 to 17%. Like I definitely wouldn't be surprised, because I think there are a lot of, not necessarily misconceptions, but there are a lot of things that like people disregard as being a part of it. So like, I just thought it was, I didn't really think anything of the fact that I couldn't use tampons. Like I just assumed I had a very tiny vagina and that was what the problem was. I never kind of thought, I just couldn't get the angle right. And that's why it wasn't going in. I never thought of it as like, actually it's because, the muscles in my vagina are tightening so much that I physically can't get it in. But I think for a lot of people, like it's been a really eye-opening when I'm talking to friends, or like, because I've got an idea, like it's my future baby of a business idea is I want to design sex toys specifically for people who have vaginismus and pelvic floor issues and kind of base them on dilators. And once I started talking about that, it was this amazing conversation where actually a few of my friends who it had never been a topic we'd had. We all do pole together, but we always talked about different things. Suddenly they were going, actually, yeah, I've got it and stuff like that. And I think people don't, I think a lot of people are either embarrassed to say that they've got it because obviously it's that having to explain it. But then on the same time, I think with with regards to misconceptions, I think it is like when you lose your virginity, we're always told, oh, your first time hurts. We're always told, oh, it's because of this, or we're always told, you know, if sex hurts, it's either this idea of like the penis is too big, or I wasn't properly turned on, you know, I wasn't wet enough. And it might, and I'm not saying that's not something that people do also have as well, but I'm saying like, obviously, until you're in a situation where you're like, I can physically feel like when I'm at my most stressed and like I have a flare up, I can be sat down and feel the muscles in my vagina physically like clamping down on nothing because I'm so in my head and so stressed. And until you're in that situation where you're like, why is my body doing this outside of sex? I think you kind of ignore a lot of the symptoms until you're in like these very normal, like not normal, but like these day-to-day situations where it impacts your life because, you know, oh, I was nervous with a partner. Oh, it was this. Oh, the sex was too rough. And it's not actually sitting down and going, there shouldn't be, unless you ask for it, there shouldn't be a lot of pain during sex. Like it shouldn't be, even if you do have sex and there is a little bit of pain, it shouldn't be to that point because it is such a sharp pain that it is.
And there's
like
different types of pain too. Like there really is like the good pain, and then there's like this is gonna like a terrible pain or a bone breaking pain, like a muscle tear pain. Those are way different.
I'm like it like for me the only way I can describe it is it's almost like, you know, when you get like a cramp up your leg, like that, and like, you know, where it's like your toes go, like when it goes from like your feet all the way up, that agonizing pain where you can feel, it's almost like you can feel every single muscle throbbing and twitching, and then also how tight it is. That is how painful it is when I have a flare up with mine. But no, with regards to things like, you know, finding like an online community, like there's been a massive online community. And I think when it does come to treatment, I think a lot of people just assume it's either one or the other, because it is either a mental, you know, it's part mental, part physical. So I think a lot of people think the easiest way to cure yourself is, oh, you just get dilators and you just go to town on yourself with getting your body used to the dilators. But like actually going and having that sexual therapy at the same time and like relearning what your boundaries are and relearning how to kind of trust your body and teach your body to relax is also a really one. I also think as well, like people forget it, like it feels very clinical when you use the dilators, but you can find a way to make it fun. Like, so for me, I use sex toys alongside my dilators. I'll make a whole evening of it. Like, you know, I use like my wand at the same time, because I think people think with the dilators, oh, I'm just teaching my body to accept penetration, but actually we need to shift that mindset to I'm teaching my body to accept and welcome pleasure, because once you can actually get your brain to understand this is pleasurable for me and I enjoy this, that's much easier to get your body to relax and to allow penetration than to just have it be this really clinical thing of, you know, oh, I've got this dilator and I need to get it in. And I'm going to have like no mood music and I'm not going to do anything to make me feel like sexy or anything like that. I'm like, no, like I romance myself when I use mine.
I think actually the advice that you're giving, I think it almost sounds like everyone should almost do this, because if you take away the clinical aspect, no one wants to think that they're doing a clinical thing like that. I wouldn't assume.
No. And I think also like it's, you know, we've all been in the, like, so over, I keep saying gynecologist, so over here it is, but I don't know what it is in.
Yeah, it's gynecologist.
Oh, is it still gynecologist? Because I know obviously it's OB-GYN in America.
I guess I use gynecologist here, so I'm not sure.
I've always been used to saying it, but like, you know what I mean? Like they're the most clinical places to ever be. You know, you sat there, your legs akimbo, It's slightly cold always because you're in a doctor's surgery.
You
It's
hear that crinkling of that paper underneath you. You can feel less sexy.
Exactly. I'm like, why? Like, and I think like, because I know I did it the first few times, like using the first dilators the first few times, especially on the smaller one, it really was like that similar kind. There was no music. I was just there, like, am I doing this right? And I kind of realized like the only way to enjoy, like, yeah, you've got to get rid of that clinical side of it, and you've got to get into it and kind of use that as like a way of accepting pleasure and learning pleasure, and also like relearning to trust yourself as well. Like, you know, if it hurts, don't force it. You know, like my therapist was amazing. She was this person that I was like, you know, I'd have weeks where I could be like, okay, I can use up to like the second biggest one. And then something would happen and I'd be right back down to using only the thinnest one. And she was like, that's allowed. Like, you know, if it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be this goalpost of, oh my God, it needs to be like this. So long as you're happy, so long as you're enjoying what you're doing, and so long as it feels good. Because if it doesn't feel good, your body will tell you, and you should automatically stop. Like that's what you will do. You will naturally want to protect yourself. So you will stop so you can learn to do it. And then you can use that learning to help you learn to say it to a partner as well. And it's I think sexual wellness go hand in hand with sexual confidence, like through my learnings of coming through and doing my therapy.
Oh, absolutely. I think the more you learn with sexual wellness, your confidence can only increase. And it's a difference of education in the sense like school, you can learn some things about sex, but it's not really like you're learning about sexual energy or how you should feel while having sex. Like, I think the most basic I would get is, oh, have sex with people you trust, but it's so much more than that. It's not just how they trust, but make sure that they can handle you how you want to be handled. Like, again, like if someone's too rough with you too quickly, it comes off very fast and you have nowhere to go. And I feel like you can feel trapped in a situation where you're like, oh fuck, I'm like too far into this, but it's actually like, no, you're not too far into anything. Like you can stop, change, navigate any part of that process.
Well, you think, what is it like? The whole conversations about like consent have only literally just entered the sexual education in schools like that. And that's the terrifying thing, because a lot of people, especially when it comes to female pleasure, when it comes to the pleasure of people who have vulvas, like just in general, because I think we also don't talk about it from like, you know, from the trans perspective, there are still nerve endings down there. So it is being like, the fact that most of us don't get taught about vaginas outside of like childbirth is like, because we all get told, oh, we've got muscle in it, and when you give birth it stretches, but nobody tells you actually, yeah, this muscle is so powerful and so strong that, by the way, if it decides it wants nothing in there, you're gonna get nothing in. It can physically lock itself. And obviously, if you keep pushing for it, you are going to hurt and you are going to get tearing and stuff like that. Like it does happen, because a lot of people don't understand this feeling enough for themselves to be able to go, please get it out of me. You know, and that's when you end up with like people bleeding and getting hurt. But also I think like we don't talk about being able to trust someone isn't just, oh, I trust you to physically handle me. Like you need to be able to trust somebody enough that, you know, your voice can be heard. Like you need to be able to trust not just yourself and your own, like trusting your own body's reactions, but you need to be able, like, we don't talk enough about being able to speak up during sex, and why talking in sex is so important, because you need to be able to say, that hurt, please don't. Like, you know, if it's a partner you've been with for a first time, they're not going to know if your body's physical reactions are pleasure or pain.
Well, it comes down to also like to your previous comment about boundaries and all that. It's sexual rights. Like I feel like that lacks in sexual wellness education is sexual rights. We might talk about consent, which is a right, but it's a sexual right to be able to have certain, like, just sexual rights goes farther than just consent. Like I should be able to have sex with who I want if they're consenting to it. For instance, like there's tons of countries out there and all these rules that are changing and laws that are changing about who we can be with and who we can love and not love, and ideas around it, how some people think it should only be between men and women. And there's some people, like, I've seen crazy documentaries. There was one in Germany where they were protesting being able to have sex with animals, which I'm not for, but the extreme on the other side, you know what I mean? Like, it's all over the place, but like, I don't consider that a right, because the dog or whoever doesn't have a right. I just think that's weird, but they do.
No, I know what you mean. And when you do say like, it's about people who consent, it's making clear of like consenting adults.
Yes.
Like, you know, not like an animal, that like, not the farm animals, those poor farm animals. It's always them that get like, you know what I mean? But I know what you mean. Like, when it is like, there is a limit to it, but when it becomes between two consenting adults, what they do together, how they have sex together, how they enjoy having sex together, whether they want to be vanilla, whether they want to do hardcore BDSM, or like whether it is he prefers to be pegged every other day. People shouldn't have the right to tell you that any of that is wrong. That's kind of, that's sexual rights, and connects so well with sexual wellness, because it's through sexual wellness, it's through being able to tap in and know what your body wants, and to know your body is healthy, and then to build that confidence as well. Like, they're also interconnected with each other. Well,
sexual wellness, like even traits that you can expand on, that is like skills that have improved for me through sexual wellness. It's imagination, but also endurance. I consider sex an exercise as well. I like, it can be sometimes do a whole quickie, 15 minutes, this is good or whatever. But sometimes it's like, I wouldn't say all day, but it's definitely like I'm sweating by the end of it. And so endurance skills have gone up, imagination has gone up. Other skills, regulating my emotions through sex has certainly helped, because I do believe you can through sexual wellness, just like any type of wellness. It's just making sure that your emotions are balanced, that you're in a physical state where you're healthy. And sexual wellness is inherent in us, because we all have a sexual self, a sexual energy. It's connected. It's animalistic, which I guess is what we are as well.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, so from that, so why do you feel people need sexual wellness? And then also like expanding on, for you specifically, like, what does sexual wellness mean as a definition for you, and like how does that definition play into why you think people need it?
Well, I think people need sexual wellness because, again, like, our sexual self is connected to us. It is inherent. And so if there's an element of ourself, we need education on it. There's so many people that don't know what they don't know. And for instance, peeing after sex, as much as that's a basic statement, I must have missed that somewhere in school. Like, I know I didn't go to class a lot, but I didn't know that. I honestly did not know that for the longest time. I don't think it was until my 20s when I figured that out. And after sex, like, it would hurt to pee, like I'd get UTIs, and I just kind of thought it was normal, quote unquote. But again, it was a normal thing that I didn't say to anybody. I kept that to me. Like, I was like, okay, you know, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm going to handle this myself. I'm not going to really ask for help. But then it kind of came up in casual conversation. Somebody said, oh, you have to pee after sex. You should do this because it's XYZ. And it just was a light bulb. And I started doing that. And I never once got a UTI ever again. And it's just the basic thing. And again, it goes to the point, no one knows what they don't know. But I wish that sexual wellness wasn't something so many people would be scared to talk about, because it's all these little micro changes and advice that really can completely change and revolutionize how you have sex. Because if you take a UTI, and as much as like, oh, just pee after sex, but I knew a girl in college that she had a UTI and she didn't get it fixed, and it attacked her liver or something like that. It spread up through her back. She got crazy sick. And I used to think, oh my gosh, is that going to happen to me? But I didn't know how to fix it. I would just maybe go to the grocery store, buy some pomegranate juice or whatever that type of juice is you're supposed to have. But yeah, and then to define sexual wellness, I would say, yes, it's your rights of what you have, your health, your emotional health, your physical health, spiritual health, sexual health, but it's childlike. I also include the little bit of the fun, silly goofiness. Sexual wellness doesn't have to be so like scrutinized and regulated, I guess. Like, it's not mechanical. It can be imaginative. It can spread into such like I said, childlike, fun, silly, goofy. but it's intentional. You can use sexual wellness intentionally. For instance, with BDSM, I use sex intentionally to intentionally get out aggression or high stress or just excess energy that I have. So I include that in sexual wellness as well.
No, I agree. Like I use masturbation as like basically as good for me as a sleeping pill sometimes, and also a good ab workout. I do agree on that one. Like there are times when I am like, why is my stomach in pain? And I'm like, oh, maybe one day I'll have like a 6-pack again. I know one day.
One day I'll get those abs.
Like one day good. But no, I agree with you. Like that playful side of it has definitely been such an integral part in like getting, like not getting help, but helping me with going through vaginismus. Like going back to that playful side of sex should be exploratory. Sex should be about learning new things about yourselves. Like it turns out I have really sensitive nipples. I didn't know that until I was like, well, let's see what other things give me pleasure at the same time as trying to find a way to relax my body. And like being playful and finding these ways of connecting, not just with myself, but connecting with a partner has like been something that has been eye-opening, especially because for me, the idea of having sex, it does take me longer if I'm dating to want to have sex with somebody.
Well, I was going to say, and like practicing safe sex would be different for you, I think. I feel like, because practicing safe sex is definitely sexual wellness, but it's not just throwing on a condom. I think that practicing safe sex, people will mistake it for like dental dams or condoms, and that's about it. They don't think, I don't know. I feel like that's a general consensus. If you ask somebody that, that's the main answer that I get.
Yeah, I was like, it's people's faces when I said like, you know, latex gloves, using gloves to make sure that like if you are doing things, you don't get dirt under your nails. You know, that's how you end up, especially if you do it with like with anal and vaginal as well, like anything like that. That's how you end up with like off pH balances and problems going down there.
And just another thing about gloves, like even so simple as, for instance, put cotton swabs or like tissues underneath long nails and then put your gloves on top.
So that you can't rip through.
Yeah. And also you don't scratch, just little tidbits, tricks like that.
No, I completely agree. And I think that isn't talked about. Like, you know, and I am an avid lover of having acrylic nails as a lesbian. Like, these are things that I think need to be talked about. Like, even like from like a queer female side of things, safe sex isn't really talked about a lot with it. Like the idea of like STDs and like going and getting checked, but you and your partner going and getting checked regularly. And I'm like, whether or not that is because you sleep with multiple people or just to be on the safe side. Like I really think a good part of sexual wellness is to stop telling people just go and get like an STD check when you get a new partner. Regularly go and get them, because things can take a while. Things like herpes, things like HIV, they have a time of period where they don't necessarily show up. So it's like, it's just being safe. And obviously what you choose to do, whether you choose to use condoms or not, then yeah, that's up to you, because you know you're being safe. And I think that is such a huge part of it as well, is like treating the body right during sex. And like, that is why, yeah, I agree. I'm like, for me, I think also like the use of lube is such a massive thing for me when it comes to sexual wellness. And it's all really stupid, but like, I just always remember having a conversation. In the UK, there's after 9, we have like a Durex. Durex is the condom and lube.
Yeah.
They did a lube advert a few years ago, and I thought it was a really good concept, because it was younger women all saying about like, you know, when they're having sex or when they're masturbating, getting out the lube and actually being like, you know, because it's uncomfortable, because of this, because of that. And I remember my mum was sat with me and my mum was like, yeah, but that's really stupid, because when you're young, obviously you get wet immediately. And I was like, not everybody does. Like,
not everyone does. Yeah.
Like if you are on certain types of medication, if you are stressed, if you are close to like your period, or in my case where it is like I do get wet, but I need that added. Lube is a really great way of being safe. It's a great way of making sure that like the gloves don't get like if you use like latex gloves, there's no friction there. Same with a condom, you know. And even things like, you know,
it just feels better too. Like it's just, I feel like it gets it going. I feel like if you use a little bit of lube right at the beginning, you can't like, it will increase how fast you get wet. But again, there's nothing wrong. That's sexual wellness as well. Like not everyone can get wet that fast.
No. And also like, even if you can get wet quite fast, if there is a little bit of friction and it's like a little bit, at the start, you're not going to, because you're not trying to enjoy it. You're trying to get used to having something inside of you. So I think, no, I agree. And also things like, like
when you move, I feel like if you move too many positions, just the fucking air alone, I've been in weird situations where the fan will be in a weird position and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, I'm dry. Okay, that was an air conditioner right there. Like, thank you.
Yeah, or like, I've had it where I've been like wet in other areas. And then I've like used like my wand, and I've got a very powerful wand on my clit. And it's not wet there. Like, it's just that little bit dry. And it is like sandburn. I'm like, we need to I feel like the noise should be. And it's like, I really feel like, we need to talk, like sexual wellness needs to be taken outside of this whole just like regular, you have sex to have a baby. Like sexual wellness needs to be something that is taught to everybody, from even the emotional side of it, like you said, how you can use it to regulate yourself, how it can act. The actual benefits of sex on your emotions needs to be discussed as well as part of sexual wellness, in my opinion.
Yeah, like the emotional elements that you can get out of sexual wellness, I think are maybe I'm biased here, but I think it's more important than the physical elements that you can get out of sex. Emotional elements that you can get out of sex are more important to me. Like that's really what I get out of it first, is the mental side of it. Because if it's just seeking an orgasm, I really can't just grab a vibrator and just walk out into my room for 5 minutes and that's it. Like if that's what I'm seeking. But sex to me is such a playground, and it's an emotional playground, and it's a mental playground for me before it's a physical playground.
Yeah, no, I agree. So like on that, with this idea of there being different stages of learning sexual wellness, do you think, at what age do you actually feel like sexual wellness should be taught at? And do you think it's a topic for schools or for families to talk about? Like, how do you think these conversations should be?
I think kids are incredibly smart. I think that you can talk to kids about anything if given at their level. I think that when it comes to sex, though, it was tough. I used to think that it was the school's response, like school should teach it. And now I don't have that opinion at all. I actually think it needs to come back to the family's responsibility, because I don't particularly trust everything that they teach in school. I also don't know what they're learning. I don't actually know specifically. So I'm not going to just assume that they're going to learn everything I need them to learn when I don't know. But at least if I take that education back into my own hands and I teach my children, then I know that they're being taught.
Yeah.
Like I know that they're getting it. It's not like a wishful thinking. For instance, like my parents didn't talk about sex in my household at all. And I was forced to learn through the school system, which was nothing. So then when I got older, it was learning timbits on my own. Like, I guess I didn't really have an educator about sex until way later, until my mid-20s, really, when that first started. But that was a number of years where I was still having sex and not really knowing what I was doing.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was quite lucky. I had I kind of got the best of both worlds. So like with my mum always had a very open door policy for like me and my older sister. So sex has never been a taboo subject, like to the point where like we joke about it a lot, me and my parents. The idea of my parents having a sex life has never been one of those where it's like, oh my God, ew, icky. Like I'm aware if my parents say we're having a date night, please don't call us, I know that means that they're having a date night. And
I think to your point that if you start off with sex not being a taboo topic or a weird thing, then you don't get those kids that are running around that grow up into like, oh, sex, like it's actually just so normal. And because we don't approach it like normal, it's skewed how we viewed sex. Like some people think it's immoral. Some people think that it's wrong. That to me has gone too far. Like that's not right. Someone taught them that. And I'm not saying all education on sex is correct, but it's definitely not wrong. No, like having sex and sexual wellness.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think also like I know that we want to live in this perfect world where a lot of like I feel like it's a lot of old school values where it's this idea of like, you can't have sex unless you love someone. And I'm like, that's bullshit. You can.
Yeah.
What you need to tell people is you need to move away from that idea of you can't have sex unless you're in a relationship, or you can't have sex unless it's done monogamous, or you can't have sex unless it's done for there needs to be a walk away from that, and there needs to be more of a focus on have sex with people that you trust
and have sex educatedly. Like, obviously, if you're going to have sex with multiple partners, you have a responsibility to those partners for their health to tell them. That's something that you do. And as much like as a responsible person, you need to be doing that with everyone you connect with.
Yes. Up until adulthood, that's where I think there really needs to be, like, it's not putting the complete kind of thing on saying, oh, it's the family who need to educate. I'm aware there are going to be conversations that no parent wants to have with their child, but having that open door policy and having things not be a secret, or not having things be this idea of like, hush, hush, oh, we don't talk about it, because I'm like, that means like you're likely to go and talk to somebody about if you've got an STD or or even a UTI, because like, let's be honest, these are like, once you are in a position where you can feel safe enough to say to somebody, I had sex and then afterwards this happened to me, you kind of end up in this amazing conversation. Like, it builds that open door policy, you build that ability to communicate about sex that you will then take from these situations to your partners. Like that idea of, like you said, you're having sex with multiple partners, there is a responsibility on you to say, I am having sex with multiple people, because you need to be able to tell people so everybody is safe and so everybody can remain healthy.
But even just before we get too off of the other thing, I do think it's a responsibility as the parents, like these conversations that no parents want to have. Unfortunately, they're conversations, I don't care if you don't want to have them. Like, you just can't actually ignore them. And I think that's also like, maybe that's a little bit into parenting, but I do think that you are responsible when you do decide to have a kid, that these are conversations that you need to have. Sex is definitely one of them. Because if you don't tell someone, hey, this is how you should be treated, especially in sex, if you don't sit your child down and say, okay, when you do start to have sex, there's going to be, especially with women, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to have sex with you or use you. When you kind of have like a buffer, for instance, like say we were talked, high school is a big one because that's all where it starts. Kids start getting more freedom, I guess, getting together, everybody's merging, puberty's hitting. It's a complicated time for people. But yeah, kids need the guidance. Kids definitely need guidance on sex, for sure. And I don't think it's enough just for one health class in school to be able to do it. Because when parents talk to their kids about sex, it's also, hey, set the standard for yourself so you're just not going to anyone. Like, people, like what you said, people have to work to have sex for you. And I think that's great. I feel like I not necessarily gave sex away, but it was just, now I see, be a little bit more patient, like be with better people that are better at sex, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really hard one. Like, it's not giving it away, but I know there are definitely times where if there was more of an understanding and more of a knowledge, and like if the conversations that were taking place today, like, and I come from a very open family. I am aware, like I said, I'm aware my mum listens to this podcast. She's very excited for this one because she wants to talk about my vaginity thingy, my bob, as she started doing it.
Yeah.
The thingy that, the thingy cat. I'm like, yes, the clam.
The clam.
It's a really interesting one of like, we've always had this really, really amazing relationship where we've always been able to talk about stuff. But I feel like if these conversations of now was back then, it would have been so much easier. Like if vaginismus was something that was talked about and like actually something that people acknowledged that there was a pain in sex, and that pain in sex isn't normal. But no, I get it. Like if I had those conversations of, there shouldn't be pain during sex, or actually this type of pain is unnormal, or even like these ideas of like, if you feel nervous and being able to say to people, I'm nervous, please stop doing this to me. Because I feel like my mum did as best she could for the time that we were in, that were way ahead of like the 90s and early noughties. So I feel like if we'd had the same conversations that we have now back then, I would have been so much better about it. Because I definitely, like, I didn't give it I wouldn't, like, I don't like that I gave away like sex, but I definitely, on an emotional level and on a physical level, allowed a lot more things to happen to me on a passive level that I shouldn't have, where I assume my feelings were normal. And it would have been better if actually these conversations were happening back then, where it's like, if you are nervous, you are allowed to stop. Or like,
But
if you
even
were,
that, it wasn't what we were taught at all. Again, like to your point, it was pain. Sex is painful. So deal
yeah,
with it. Like we were programmed. I don't maybe programmed, but yeah, we were programmed to
yeah,
think it's okay. Like
yeah,
school systems were telling out like adolescent kids that sex is painful and that's normal.
yeah, sex is
And
real, and female orgasm doesn't exist. The body, like, also that things will just naturally fall into place. I think too many people just are having bad sex because they naturally assume their body is having a normal reaction when their body isn't at all. Like I did. I was like, oh, completely normal that this girl says having her fingers in me is almost like breaking point. That's a normal reaction. I just haven't, like, no.
yeah, it's like it goes back to the normal. What is normal for me? What is
Yeah.
normal for you? Because it's just the reality of what we've lived in until we meet someone who changes that, who gives us those good information or maybe different information that makes us say, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't even view it that way, or wait, this isn't normal. Like that's not supposed to happen.
I think, like, obviously schools do, that is a thing on schools to keep the education going, but no, they're not on like the family level. I do think, yeah, the only way you start to learn these things is by having a non, like you said, it's going to be awkward. You're not going to want to know. Nobody wants to think that their child is having sex, but at the same time, it's being like, accept it. You need to accept it, and you need to not make them feel bad, ashamed, or unnormal for what they come to you and say. That is the only way to have good sexual wellness talks with your kids.
Like I feel like parents are in denial when it comes to kids. I know that I was working an event and I was telling them about my business, and this older lady came up to me and said, I have a 12-year-old granddaughter. Is she having sex? And I said, I don't know her, but probably is, because the age limit now is like 11 or 12. Like it keeps getting younger for the average kids to start having sex is around that age. And before I used to think it was high school, but now we're talking about middle school, elementary school kids. They're trying it because social media is everywhere, internet is everywhere, sex is everywhere, whether it's in movies, TV, innuendos and television shows, it's everywhere. And then you have like a sexual instinct, and I feel like it's weird. We live in a society that triggers sexual energy and sexual wants and desires, but then they act like they don't and leave people completely confused.
Yeah.
And then they have no one to turn to. And to the idea of only talking about sexual education in high school is ridiculous to me, because it's adults that need to be talking to other adults about this. I think sex should be brought up in friend groups. I think good friends should be talking about their sex life. Like they don't need to get into the grittiness of it, but like women, I think, are a lot more open to talk about with their girlfriends about it. Men talk about sex in a, I don't, like, I'm not a man, but I can't, from the men conversations that I hear about sex, it's more of a, yeah, she looked like this, or it happened like that, but they don't actually talk about sex or like how it made them feel. And men feel sex during, like men feel during sex as well. And to act like they don't is ridiculous. But for some reason we do, because we just want to ignore it and not talk about it.
Yeah, it's that whole idea. Yeah, it's saying to be like, it's such an emotional thing to do, sex on a baser level, on a primal level, that it is almost like, yeah, they do kind of push it away. I think also from what I've seen with like the men in my life, the men that I've talked to about sex, anything that deviates from the norm, or like the whole idea of just like, yeah, you know, she laid there, I pumped it in her a few times. They are so like, and it cracks me up. They get very like, oh, about it once you talk to them. Like talking to men about sex toys is one of my favorite topics, Not about me using them, about them using them. I'm like, men need to use sex toys on themselves.
Yeah,
And they were
I
like,
think
oh,
what it,
what? Like shoving a dildo up my ass. And I'm like, if that's what you want to try it. But a wand on the end of your penis is also really intense.
I think growing up in high school with men with sex toys, like I got the idea that when men were using sex toys, they used it as a, what, you need a toy, a battery on top of me? Like, how dare you? I should be suffice. They use it as if it's like a competition. It's your friend. Merge it.
Exactly. It's like, look, I like peanut butter and I like jam. I put them together. I've got an amazing sandwich. But it is like, no, I agree. I think it is trying to explain to be like, these are not your like, it's not your competition. But also just being like to them, go and explore what you like. Like, I think a lot, because I do think from what I see from like the articles I write, from like the industries that I work in, a lot of sexual wellness, as it should be, is focused on the feminine. It's focused on vulva owners more than anything, you know. And like, you know, and I use vulva owners because obviously there are like, you know, trans men do still to some like still have a vagina at certain points. And it is being like, I agree that sexual wellness needs to focus on that, because that has been kind of shifted for so long, where we're like, you know, the vagina, we don't really talk about it because it doesn't really do much, and it does the most. It creates life, for Christ's sake, and it has the most nerve endings, and it's the most it's like the most sexual fucking organ ever. But I do think like, yeah, like there is not enough talk on sexual wellness and like that side of things for men as well. And for like penis holders, I'm like, no, go and find out what you like. Go and enjoy new things. You might enjoy a more submissive role. Like there's nothing wrong with that either. You don't have to be the aggressor all the time. In fact, you might find you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sexual wellness is like, and before I said it was such a broad topic, and it really is. And it's one of those definitions that we all have to define and redefine ourselves, and will continuously change as we go. All the like, obviously, sexual wellness includes sexual rights, health, how you have sex, who you have sex with. Like, there's basic staples of it, but the actual wellness of it, like for instance, like the emotions that I get out of it might be different than somebody else's emotions getting out of it. Individual journeys. And that's what I love about sex so much, because it really is an individual journey that you can continue all the way down, like forever until you die, really. I don't believe in this thing that as you get older, you just don't have sex. I don't believe that. I heard some crazy stat that it's like all old people, and not all old people, but I heard a crazy stat that the STD cases in old folks' homes are ridiculously high. I'm going to find that stat for us next time. Next one.
Wait, that does make a lot of sense. But no, I agree. I think older people are still banging, and they should be. Like we should be. Enjoy sex. In fact, you know what? Enjoy like different forms of sex. Go and explore BDSM and kink, and go and see if that's something that you like as well. Because I feel like a lot of older people are like, they've gone through like the kind of conservative views of sex, and now they're at this point where they're like, well, I'm gonna die in a few years, I can try anything once. And it's
like, exactly.
But with that one, sorry, before we wrap up, one of the questions that I did want to ask for you, obviously with the partition and like the home of kink, where do you see like kink and BDSM within the world of sexual wellness then? Because I think that is a huge part of kind of what the partition is about.
I think that that is sexual wellness. Like BDSM and kink to me is hand in hand with sexual wellness. Kink and BDSM, again, there's all levels of it. So unless you're just doing missionary with no toys, no tools, no nothing, and you're not using your imagination, then any degree above that, you are on BDSM, you are using kink. Even if you pretend that you're in an outfit or in a different room, or you pretend that you and your partner are some exotic island, like that's imagination, that's wellness, because you're exercising your brain, you're exercising your creativity, which pushes critical thinking, which critical thinking also fixes, problem solving. Yeah. Critical thinking helps problem solving, which you don't get without imagination. So as much as that is, imagination might not be sexual wellness, you can certainly execute that through sexual wellness. And BDSM, it's sexual wellness because for instance, I can use it to get the aggression out, but it's not just about aggression. I know I focus so much on that, but it's pleasurable. Like, it's making sure that you are happy in your sex. If you're happy in your sex, then your sexual wellness will most likely be a positive experience. But if you're just continuously doing sex that you don't like, then you're miserable, and your sexual wellness will never be okay because it will never be a positive example. So I think admitting that you like BDSM and kink can be a first step, if in the right direction, or at least not admitting, but testing it out. And I think everyone should try it out, really, because I think all of us within us we all have sides of us that we aren't able to showcase to the world. There are sides of us that are private and like personal and intimate, and we want to just show those to ourselves or to the partner that we're with, or the BDSM person that we create partnerships with. Because those sides of me that you put out through BDSM and kink, they are not the same version that I put out into the real world. I find those incredibly highly intimate, and that's wellness. Like, that's really showcasing me and seeing me on the whole scale, well-roundedness. I'm able to just experience life. I'm just able to experience everything I want to by performing and executing and doing these things through BDSM and kink.
Perfect.
Well, Kat, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show, as always. Thank you so much.
It was lovely to be back, and I can't wait for the next episode as well.
Well, that's it for us. Join the conversation and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Do you have an article or topic that you want us to talk about? Let us know. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time. And as always, stay kinky.